Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host, and today we're going to be taking a look at safety certifications for chocolate workshops. This is a little bit different from the look we've been doing in past episodes with respect to other certifications. We're going to take a look at things like UL, CE, NSF, and more, what they mean, what you need to know about them, and why they are important, and what you should do to make sure that you're taking the greatest advantage of them. We're not going to be looking at these in the abstract. We're going to be taking a look at specific instances, just ways that you can go and make sure that the equipment that you're purchasing or you're considering purchasing has some of these certifications. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to just mention that no matter where you're watching, whether it's on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, you can go into the comments. And if you have a question or a comment about anything that I am talking about today, you can enter it and I will get it up on screen and I will do my best to get it answered. And I'd also like to point out that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. This is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. If you're not a member, you can go click on the join button. There's always a free membership tier. There has been free memberships since 2008. But if you do have the financial resources to support what it is that we're doing, what it is that I'm doing, then you can become a premium member for as little as $5 a month or $42 a year. I'm a big Douglas Adams fan. You'll find 42 showing up a lot of different places around the Chocolate Life. And with that, let's get started. Here is the homepage of the Chocolate Life, and I'm going to click on the post for today's episode. For every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I do create a post, which provides me with a quick run of show. So these are not scripted, so I can respond to comments in real time, right, as things go on. But it does, you can go back and refer to these posts and at any point. And if there is a new topic that I do bring up, I can put links to it onto this post. So I want to make one more notice, which is the idea for today's episode came from a member of the Chocolate Life. If you are a premium member of the Chocolate Life, again, for as little as $5 a month or $42 a year, you can say, hey, Clay, I am interested in you covering this subject as a part of a Pod Save Chocolate episode. And you'll find all of these. There is if I scroll down to the bottom, there is an Ask TCL link, and you can find out. These are all post episodes of Pod Save Chocolate, which have been recommended by members of the Chocolate Life. So that's one reason to consider. And so with that out of the way, the photograph that you're looking here, I duplicated it. The photograph that is here is of an actual fire that resulted from a melanger overheating. And the owner of it was not aware that the melanger had caught on fire and had set his workshop on fire. And so again, a member of the Chocolate Life sent this to me and said, hey, Clay, what do you think? And that's the genesis for this episode. So if you are in the United States, right, or in Europe, there are three primary certification standards that you need to be aware of. One is called UL, one is called CE, and the other one is called NSF. So UL is Underwriters Laboratories, right? And there is a list of what these things cover. Right, so the Underwriters Laboratories looks at electrical, fire, and mechanical safety issues. And the scope is rigorous testing of electrical components, wiring, and fire resistance. Right, and all of these are done by third-party, OSHA-approved, nationally recognized testing laboratories, one of which is a laboratory called ETL. Right, and it requires independent certification, lab testing before certification. So if you have a piece of equipment and it says UL on it, there are a couple of things that you can know about it. It has been looked at from both a mechanical and an electrical perspective. And it's important to understand that this is both high voltage and low voltage electrical perspective. So the difference between 120 or 220 volt AC input, either 50 or 60 hertz, and the internal wiring, DC motors, which might be 12 volts DC. So it's important to understand that UL covers all of those things, and from a safety perspective, and not just the electrical perspective, but from a mechanical perspective. So they're going to look to see, can I get jammed? Can I hurt myself? Something like that if I'm not careful, right? So Underwriters Laboratory, UL, primarily North America, US and Canada. There is a certification called ECE, right? And what it does is it only covers conformity with EU health safety and environmental regulations. It is accepted in the EU only, right? So there's no formal US acceptance. So for example, if you have a piece of equipment and it says it is CE certified, that does not mean that it meets UL certification standards. There is, whereas UL certification would generally cover everything that CE certification does, with the exception of environmental regulations, right? One of the things that's really important to understand about the difference between UL and CE is that UL must be done by an independent, nationally recognized testing laboratory. That's one of the things when you see UL listed or when you see a UL sticker on something, right? However, the CE sticker is largely a manufacturer's self-declaration of compliance. So a manufacturer has the list of CE regulations in front of them, and what they'll go through is self-report that the device is in compliance with CE regulations. Unfortunately, for electrical equipment, right, it only covers low voltage. It doesn't cover high voltage, right? So it doesn't cover a 240 volt, 50 hertz power supply, nor would it cover a 220 volt, 60 hertz power supply. It only covers the internal electrical components. There's an electromagnetic compatibility directive, and my understanding of this is that it doesn't radiate too much interference. So this is like an FCC declaration here in the United States that it's not transmitting radio waves, which might interfere with sensitive electronic equipment nearby. This gas safety would be propane or national gas, not the gas which is, I believe, internal. Now that I say that, I don't know. Gas safety directives might also include things like the gas which is used for compressors. Not entirely sure. And ecological requirements. So the manufacturer declares compliance. There is no mandatory third-party laboratory testing, and it doesn't address food sanitation. Now, it's also clear that UL doesn't address food sanitation standards, although there is this mechanical safety aspect to it. Right. So I'll get into specific examples. I have a lot of specific examples that I'm gonna talk about. Right. So NSF is a National Sanitation Foundation. It is globally recognized, but importantly, it's incredibly important for commercial food service in the United States. Right. NSF is an independent nonprofit organization that develops and enforces food safety standards, and it confirms that the equipment design, construction, and materials won't contaminate food or leach harmful chemicals. So there are three aspects of this, which are really important. There's a design component aspect of this. So for example, if you had a piece of equipment which had an exposed nut holding a screw down, right? And that nut might fall into the working bowl of the machine, right? For any reason whatsoever, it would not pass NSF standards, right? Because you have a metal bolt that could fall into the food, right? And somebody might break teeth or otherwise be harmed, or it has to do with human safety, not machine safety. Obviously, if you had this and you tried to run it through a machine, that bolt could ruin a machine, right? But it's public health and food verification. So equipment design. So that is one of the things that an NSF certified product is. There's nothing hanging out that's likely to fall in to what it is that you're making. Right. The other thing is construction. So, for example, the type of stainless steel, if that's a material, is it food safe? If you are using a glue to hold something together, the glue is used, for example, to hold the barrel of a melanger to the stone. right? Is it food safe? If you get chocolate in it, you heat it up to a certain point, are chemicals going to leach into it? That's one of the things that NSF certification does that neither UL nor CE certification does. And the other one talks about just washability, right? Can it, in fact, it be cleaned, right? And cleaned completely. One important thing to understand, and we'll go, there's another note about this, is that there are public health jurisdictions that require that equipment that is going to be put into a commercial facility, right? A commercial food production facility. There are jurisdictions which require NSF certification. Las Vegas is one of them. So if you wanted to put, for example, a tempering machine into production in Las Vegas and it wasn't NSF certified, the local health department could say no. Now, it is possible to send your machine off to a nationally recognized testing laboratory in the US or Canada. They tend to be cheaper in Canada, although shipping is more expensive. That can independently certify that that particular machine does in fact meet NSF standards. And when I was selling for FBM, that is something that a number of my customers in Las Vegas did. They sent their machine off. They sent a lot of equipment all at one time because it's cheaper to do that. And they got it NSF certified. So depending on where you are in the United States or the rest of the world, one or more of these three certifications are going to be apply to your situation. You need to go to your local health department and make sure that you are in compliance. Now, it may be that the inspector, the health inspector, when they get ready to give you the operational sign off on your permit, they're going to look around and they're going to go blah, blah, blah. Is this certified? Yes, no. Is this certified? Yes, no. One of the places where this shows up is the local health inspector probably doesn't know a whole lot about chocolate, right? And they'll look at a tempering machine, like a continuous tempering machine, and they'll say, how do you wash it? And you go, well, you don't wash it, or you don't wash it very often. And they'll go, well, my rules and regulations say that, all the equipment that you use needs to be able to be washed. And it can be a real challenge to be able to explain to someone, to explain to a health inspector, when you wash the internals of a continuous tempering machine with an Archimedes screw, that what you're doing is you're introducing water, which is going to cause the bacteria to grow. Or is going to be the medium in which the bacteria will grow, especially if there's food, sugar, and other things where the bacteria can grow, oxygen. And so you don't want to wash these things, right? It could be a challenge to be able to convince the inspector that it is actually generally accepted practice not to wash these machines every day, which is what they sort of expect. At the end of the day, everything gets wiped down. But UL and CE and NSF do different things, and they're aimed at different audiences, and they're aimed at different parts of the chain. If you could only have one in the United States, NSF would be the one I would go for. If you don't need NSF certification, you want to push for UL wherever you can, because it also looks at mechanical safety and the high voltage electrical components of what goes on. So how they work together. All right, so commercial equipment often has multiple certifications. I will show you examples of that. Different jurisdictional requirements, that's important. So where you are in the US, or whether in the US, EU, Canada, Japan, these are all very different, right? The UL can now perform NSF style sanitation testing, which means that if you have a UL listed product and it says UL EPH, it means it also meets NSF standards, which is cool, right? Which is a good thing. And even though a health department may say it requires NSF certification, this UL EPH certification will stand in it, or they'll show UL sanitation, which indicates they meet ANSI NSF requirements. So those are important things to know. So the practical implications of this: if you have a workshop that's an in-home workshop, cottage law, food business, UL or CE probably suffices, depending on the market. California, for the most part, if you have a cottage workshop, UL or CE will be good enough. You rarely will a An inspector require NSF certification in a home workshop. But if you are in a commercial situation or you're working in a restaurant, you're probably going to want both a safety certification, UL/CE, and food sanitation certification on your equipment. So that's it, right? But wait, there's more. There are more, right? There is this TÜV SUD, which is a German safety standard. I actually ran across this in doing some of the research. I'd not really paid attention to it before, but products bearing this mark, TÜV, have got to understand safety inspection by the product service, and they offer a continuous monitoring service, which is good. It's not just I put a piece of equipment in and I can use that certificate for 12 years or 15 years, right? There is a regular regime of going and making sure that your product meets the certification standard. And there is a US specific version of the TÜV SUD testing regime. The certification demonstrates that a product meets safety requirements and that ongoing production quality control is maintained. So that's pretty cool. So TÜV SUD would probably be for a piece of equipment that was manufactured outside the United States. It could be manufactured in the United States, but it provides something which is pretty much comparable to UL. Does that mean a local health inspector knows anything about it? The answer is maybe not, but there is a certification and you can point them to it. And you can point them to the TÜV SUD website, and you just provide that to the health inspector, and here are all the things that you need to know, right? So it includes UL for general household appliances. Pretty cool, right? For TÜV SUD. So ETL is a nationally recognized testing lab. So if something shows ETL on it, that means it is UL listed or UL certified. There is in fact a difference between ETL listed and ETL verified, which is why I mentioned it. So ETL listed means full electrical safety compliance plus ongoing inspections of the factory. That's the manufacturing facility. ETL verified is the performance claim only, does not include the electrical safety testing. So if you see something with an ETL mark, you want it to say ETL listed, like UL listed. Right? You want that. You want to make sure that you get that. And there's a little comparison table between ETL, UL, and TÜV SUD here, so you can figure out what your certification covered. Right? So think of UL, CE, and NSF as addressing different question. Is it electrically safe? Does it meet regulations? Will it keep food sanitary? Those are the three things you need to be careful of. Let's start taking a look at some specifics, right? So here is the page, for a Spectra 11 melanger. So if you look at a Spectra, and I'm going to do Spectra, Cocoa Town, DCM, Kadzama, and a little bit about FBM, right? So you know that I'm just not picking and choosing one particular manufacturer here. I want to go and take a look at this across many different manufacturers. So this is the current homepage. We're doing this live for the Spectra 11 stone melanger. And we're looking down at the page and we're trying to figure out what that page says. And we're looking down here. I mean, I could search for CE or UL or any of the things. And we see down here in the lower right, it says, here is the CE certificate. Keep in mind that this is the Spectra 11 we're looking at, right? And here is a statement of confirmation, all right, for CE certification for Spectra Plaza. We're looking at a melanger, a food grinder, and this CE certificate is for a 25, 45, 70, 105, and 155 machine. It does not cover the 11 specifically, which is an important oversight. It's showing, there's a link to a CE certificate, but not for this particular piece of equipment. The other thing that is here is that this was done on the 11th of June, 2018, right? So, right, and I believe that Mahesh Gaur would be, works for Spectra. I'm thinking of that. But notice here, there's also this TÜV mark, right? So this TÜV is this other certification that I talked about, primarily European, and it provides the ongoing factory certification to make sure that everything is okay in the factory. This is TUV in India that is doing this. That makes sense because I believe these machines are produced in India, even though many of them are sold in Europe, right? But I am wary of two things. Number one is this certificate was generated in 2018, and the Spectra 11 is not mentioned here. So I would, before purchasing a Spectra 11, what I would do is I would go email Spectra Plaza and I would say, can you provide a specific CE certificate for the Spectra 11? And do you have something which is more current than 2018? So this is now issued 8 years ago. And one of the things, the reason why I mentioned it is one of the things that a Spectra mentions on a regular basis. Again, I look at these things. Note, we regularly update our designs as part of a continuous product improvement. Well, that means that not only is this 11, right, not included in the CE certificate, but have they made changes to the 11 that are not included in the 2018 certificate? So this is where you want to be careful, right? And one of the things that we do know about these machines is that there's no thermal cutoff in the machines. So if the machine starts to heat, it doesn't automatically turn itself off. So this is one of the reasons why I think you need to be careful about making sure what goes on. So I would inquire, right? I would inquire about a CE certificate for the 11 specifically. I would inquire about something that's a little more current, and that I would inquire about, is there a thermal cutoff switch internally, right? Because CE, right, is low voltage, not high voltage, and this is a 120 volt AC motor in it. So you do want to be careful about that. So I did take a look at another Spectra, excuse me, let me go and make sure I'm in the right browser page. I did take a look at another machine, Spectra 45, 220 volt, and excuse me, what we do find is belt drive or chain drive. So here is one thing you do want to be careful about when you want to buy these machines. Belt drives are usually rubber, and over the course of a period of time, they will stretch. Even if they're V-belts, they will stretch, right? And what that may mean is that if they stretch or if they start slipping or sliding, oh my gosh, if you want CE certification for this, you have to spend an additional $500 for CE certification. That's weird, right? Is this a CE certificate for this particular machine? Not entirely sure. This is not the way CE certification is supposed to work, right? But if you're going to buy an offset design where the motor is over here and the drive shaft for the melanger is here, chain drive is going to be a better option because it's not going to stretch. But if you are going to use a belt drive, you probably want to replace the belt drive with one which has got a much higher rating associated with it, right? This CE certification is weird. So this is the Spectra 45NB. Let's go down to the bottom of the page. Number one is we regularly update our designs. So this is a standard footer, and this is a CE certificate, which seems to apply. Well, this doesn't apply to the 45NB, right? So you need to be very careful about that. And then you actually have to ask them, you should be able to get one CE certificate. It's this is for the TUV. I don't know. I mean, it says CE certification, which is manufacturer self-cert. And so I don't understand why they're charging $500. But unless what it is, it also includes TUV certification. Something to ask the manufacturer. Again, three things. Show me a current certificate for this particular version. Number one, I would ask them about the CE/TUV part of it. And the second part is, does this have a thermal cutoff on it? So if it overheats, will it turn itself off? It's much better to have chocolate in the drum, which is solidified, than for the entire thing to overheat and to catch on fire. We don't want that happening. We don't want machines catching on fire. So those are, and if you go through all of the Spectra grinders, you will see that that is a consistent thing. Or, let's go back here, Spectra 11. Obviously, they're not going to charge $500 for CE certification for something that only costs $475, right? So that's why you're not seeing it. You do have to read closely, and this is one of the reasons why I'm doing what it is that I'm doing. Here are the certifications. How do you figure out what certifications your machine has? Because when I look at the photographs here, there's actually at no point do I see anything which might talks about, oh, here's the certificate. There's usually a sticker. There should be a sticker on the machine which talks about that. All right, let's go from Spectra. Let's go to Cocoa Town. So here is the Cocoa Town ABI 10 melanger. First thing, number one, I'm looking at this photograph, and this doesn't look like it's vertical to me. This looks like it's not perfectly vertical. I would worry about wobbliness here for a bunch of reasons. And so I would ask the people at Cocoa Town, is that just the way the photograph is taken? Or is there an issue with these things wobbling? So you're going to come through here and you're going to look at the melanger. And one of the things that you're going to find is there's nothing here that says anything. There's nothing on this page that says anything about CE or any other form of certifications. It's not on the equipment description page. It's not on the specifications page. I wouldn't assume that it was on the parts page, the accessory page, or the other uses page. So, right. But I do want to point out something interesting on the parts page, cylindrical roller stones. And hey, Clay, what are cylindrical roller stones all about? And why would I want cylindrical stones as opposed to what basic roller stones? Right. We'll talk about that because Cocoa Town offers machines which have conical roller stones. And why would you want a conical roller stone, or what's the difference? When you think about the way a melanger works, most melangers work, you have a base, and on big melangers, it's the base that turns and the wheels stay stationary. But in the small melanger, the base turns or the wheels turn. Again, it depends on what kind of machine that you're using. But if I have cylindrical stones, the interior edge of the stone which is closest to the center of the melanger, rotates at a different speed from the outside edge of the melanger, just the nature of physics. And depending on how you put the pressure, if you put a lot of pressure or less pressure, you can in fact dig a groove into the base or wear down the stone, right, in your melanger. And where does that stone dust go? It goes into your chocolate. With a conical stone, the shape of the cone says that the speed of the grinder, right, is going to be uniform across the entire face, the contact point of the machine, which means it's going to be more even in terms of the way it does its refining. So it's not likely to changes in pressure are not going to change, especially if you have very thin wires, right? If you put a lot of pressure, there is a bowing effect which happens, B-O-W, a bowing effect which happens, which could reduce the consistency of contact across the surface. So you do need to be aware of the size, the shape of the stones, and the axle material that is used. So basically a heavier weight axle is going to resist that bending much better than a lighter weight axle. Also, in these less expensive machines, what you'll do is that there's often a plastic Delrin insert which goes into the stone, which acts as the bearing and if you can replace the bearing because it wears down, then you may be getting microplastics into your chocolate. Just something to consider. That in general, a sealed bearing, which is using metal parts, may be more food safe. Again, you need to make sure that the grease is food safe. You need to make sure that the metal is food safe. And then you might want to make sure that you have a magnetic trap or some sort of sieve, which if any metal does chip out, or if the stone cracks. I've had melangers where the edges of the stone have cracked and we've got rocks in the chocolate. You do need to be careful about that. So from Mike, and by the way, Mike King at Encore Coffee and Chocolate, who's a regular guest here on PodSafe Chocolate, is the person who suggested the topic for today's episode. Mike is a premier member. If you're a premier member, you can say, hey, Clay, I'd like you to cover a topic. Do you know if running non-UL gear opens you up to liability? I.e., if there's a fire, is your liability greater if not running UL equipment? And the answer to that, Mike, is it depends. So, for example, if you're running this as a part of a cottage business in your home, then you have your own insurance, and the liability is associated with, will your insurer decide to cover you, right? And that will depend on who your insurer is, where you are, and the nature of the way you write your liability policy. And so general liability, absolutely. Business liability need to be necessary, but you need to take a look at the fire insurance components of these things to understand what's going on, right? This is something that I was going to talk about a little later, but I will mention it now because you asked the question, which is, if you're running anything which does not have a UL or similar kind of certificate on it, you need to have a fire detector, a smoke alarm, right? And you need to have those be smart, which means if they go off, they're going to send an alert to your phone, even if you're do not disturb mode, because this could happen at 3 o'clock in the morning. And just as a general business principle, you want to make sure that you have sufficient fire extinguisher capacity right by your machines. Yes, you might ruin a batch of chocolate and you might harm the equipment, but that's better than your entire house catching on fire. Now, Mike, similar kind of thing. If you rent or lease a piece of equipment, or not rent or lease a piece of equipment, if you are in a rental facility, right? So you're in an office park, right? And you've got a unit in an office park. It could be that your insurer may not cover you, right? Again, you need to make sure that you ask the hard questions, right? And if you do not have a smoke alarm or you do not have a smoke detector, you need to make sure that you do have them, and you can ask the insurer if this is enough. They may say no, right? In which case, what do you do, right? Number one is make sure that you're on a stainless steel table, and make sure there are no combustible things nearby. So, for example, you might have a fire retardant, rather than using conventional sheetrock, you might use a fire retardant sheetrock instead, or you might have a metal covering, right? A stainless steel covering over the top of it, which will do that. All right. I don't know what it costs to say, oh, I've detected. So rather than having to spend, tens of thousands of dollars on a range hood, which has got fire suppression or something like that, are there other, it's detected a fire, can I spray some fire extinguishing material, foam or something like that on top of it? There may be things, but this is a case where you need to go talk to your landlord, understand what your landlord has in the way of insurance for just general liability. And then you need to make sure that you have spoken with your insurance company to make sure that whatever you have, right, you understand how they're going to respond if there is a fire that is directly applicable to a piece of equipment. Now, another thing you could do is, let's say that you have a friend who is an Arduino programmer, or a Raspberry Pi programmer. What you could do, and you've got a piece of equipment like a little small melanger, which doesn't have a thermal protection capability to it. You could attach a thermocouple to some place on the machine, and you could program the Raspberry Pi and put it into an electrical cutoff switch so that you could create your own thermal protection bridge, right? So if it got above a certain price, a certain temperature, it would turn off the electricity, right? And it's probably worth the time and money spent in developing such a solution for yourself, because you probably instantly save that on your insurance policy, and that you're more likely to get your insurance claim respected when you can say, no, I had a thermal protection device on here on every single one of my machines. So in case it overheated, it would automatically turn itself off if it didn't already come with one. So those are two ways that I would think about doing that. So Kansas City is a soccer capital of the US, I suppose. I don't think there's an MSL team in Arizona, which is where I am. Obviously, there was in New York. But anyway, I have to admit that I grew up. My first experience to international football would have been in the 1973 FA Cup, where the Sunderland Black Cats beat Leeds United. And so I'm a big Premier League fan, right, in many respects. That doesn't mean that I'm rooting for the UK national team or any one of those teams. Would love to see the US do well. I've been lucky enough to have been able to, physically visit when the World Cup was in Los Angeles the last time, 1996, I believe it was. I was part of a group that produced the first HD broadcast of a World Cup match. So I understand, but just as an aside, Mike, I hope that answered your question. It was something that I was going to go into later on, but you asked it here, so I'm going to make sure we talk about it here. James, thanks for being back. We had a fire. The insurance company wanted proof of certification. Absolutely. Here's the point that I will make again, James, exactly, which is when you get a piece of equipment, you need to go to your insurance company before there is an issue, right? And clear things with them and say, okay, this is the piece of equipment that I've got, and there is no certification for it, right? I'm not going to pay $1,000 to get it tested, right, to do this. But are there things that I can do in my environment? So, for example, can I put a smoke alarm? Can I put a smoke detector? Can I put a fire alarm? I'm making sure that right there is a fire extinguisher, that I have ensured that there are no combustible materials within reach, so that even if it does, right, catch on fire. There are many things that you can do. Your insurance company may or may not be okay with them, and that is going to change, based on who your insurance company is. So just wanted to go there. So follow up. Our first melanger turned out to be a counterfeit of a Premier. It overheated and caught fire because we were duped with fake certificate. The claims adjuster gave us a break. Got lucky. Yeah, unfortunately, there's a gray market for people who are counterfeiting legit stuff, which, okay. I mean, there are tens of thousands of these machines out there. And it turns out that many of them are not designed to be run continuous duty. I mean, the small countertop melangers, which came from India, that production pathway, which was pioneered by John Nancy, those machines were designed to run for an hour or two in the home kitchen. And they are not designed to run for 24, 48, or 72 hours at a time. And that's one of the things to understand, right? Is that, yes, they may be inexpensive. I mean, I can go and I can look at a melanger. It's a 10-pound melanger and it's $550. But here is the point, right? Why don't I go to a DCM 15? Let's wait for the page to load. Sorry, I'm using a new browser. And I don't know why the page is not loading. So let me hide this. It was loading yesterday. There we go. So it just took a while. So here's a DCM 15. It's $1,400. Think about your insurance premium, right? And again, this is a little larger than a 10. It's a little bit more expensive, right? But if we look down here, it does have a CE certification associated with it. There are other machines which have more certifications on it, but this does have a CE certification. Again, it's low voltage, but one of the things about this machine is that it is direct drive. So inside there is a DC motor. So AC comes in, there's a voltage converter, right, turns it into DC, and it's a DC internally, which is one of the reasons why CE is going to work for this machine, right? And it turns out that, yeah, it's a little bit more expensive, but, right, it does have a certification. And so, the difference is $900. This is bigger, but what is your insurance premium? There's always this desire to think about things in terms of CapEx. How much am I putting money out? Always need to look at things in terms of total cost of ownership. There's another thing to think about with this DCM machine is there's a reverse switch on it. So in case it ever gets stuck, you can press something and it will back up, right? And it will help itself get unstuck like you're in a car. You put it in reverse to get out of the mud. There's a similar kind of thing with these machines. So just a thing to consider, right, is that about this certification. It's really important in terms of the price. Yes, you might say, oh, I only have $500 to spend, and so I'm going to buy 8 to 10 pound machine, right? Or I'm going to spend more, right? And I'm going to be able to produce more in a machine. This is a more capable machine in terms of the backup. I believe the display here will now display bowl RPM, not motor RPM. Who cares what motor RPM is? You want to be able to set, the RPM of the bowl is the same every single time, irrespective of what the motor says. Both of those things, the reverse switch and reprogramming the display for bowl RPM, are improvements that I suggested to Bhavani when I met him and saw this before it was released for the first time. But this is something to consider: total cost of ownership, right? James, I don't know what your insurance policy looks like, right? But if you knew that you could save a couple $100 a year on your insurance, and that the likelihood of your insurance would be to pay out on your insurer to pay out on a claim would be greater, this $900 difference might be worth it. Just want to put that out there, right? So let's go to the next up, the CocoTown. We have the CocoTown AB10. I don't know why CocoTown always uses such low resolution photographs. This is their 12 SLTA. This looks a lot like the Spectra Santa machine, versatile grinding. We go take a look at it. And I don't know if this one has a certification. It's not in features. It's not in specifications. All right. All the other things don't make sense. Although when we look at parts, it will do the conical roller assembly for the big drum. Again, the conical roller assembly compared with the cylindrical, what happens is that the pressure and the speed of the roller will be consistent from the inside to the outside edge, right? So that's a good thing. But notice that the axle here, which is very, you can't see it, but the axle here is very, very thin. So if you put a lot of pressure, by, screwing down the top onto this, the very, very thin axle here will in fact bow, and it will put uneven pressure across the roller surface. It will also put uneven pressure on the Delrin bearing assembly, which is there, which will cause it to wear out much more quickly. You do have to be careful about pressure for a bunch of different reasons. So here's the, it's Delrin, I think is actually it. So you can get an idea. Here is the wipe assembly. Believe it or not, these things, or the roller assemblies, these things are in fact more fragile than they look, and they're relatively easy to bend. Just a quick note. But I don't believe that there's any certification associated with this particular machine. Let's go. I don't think there's any roller certification associated with this machine. Let's go to a larger machine, which is the Alpha 50 grinder. Again, all I'm suggesting here is that I don't see anything on the website, and the photographs here are of fairly low quality, and the number of photographs that I see here are not all that great. What I would do is, a part of the buying process, right? I would contact them, right? And say, hey guys, is there a CE certificate? Is there a UL certificate? Is there an NSF certificate? Yes or no, right? Is there a thermal cutoff switch? Yes or no, right? Important things. Now, another thing that you also need to think about here, right, which is not obvious, but if in fact you do have a problem with the stone or the axle, these things can start wobbling, right? So if the bowl starts turning off center, these things can turn themselves on they can walk across the room and turn themselves on their sides, splatting chocolate all over the place while they're turning, right? I've been in a facility where this happened once, right? So another thing that you need to consider, and this is something that none of these manufacturers who do center spindle mounted where the bowl turns machines actually think about, is what happens if there's a catastrophic failure inside the machine. How do we keep it from wobbling away? Again, anybody, if you are an Arduino programmer and you can find yourself into a multi-axis accelerometer, you would be able to create a wobble detector. And if that were connected to a programmable cutoff switch, you could say, if it started to wobble, you just turn the electricity off, right? That's another thing that I think that the industry needs. These companies are not likely to do it; they can't make any money on it. But I think that it would be really cool for somebody to say, here's a parts list. If you buy this accelerometer and this Arduino and this case, and you do this, here's the bill of materials for it, and you can download this drive image, and you would be able to program it. Oh, and if you had 2 ports on it, you could put a thermal cutoff switch in the same, run by the same computer. Just a thought, right? But I don't see anything here which tells me that there's a certification. So you would have to ask. Now, the reason why I mention this is if you go from the Alpha 50 to the Alpha 100, and this is the EU website for Cocoa Town. If you do go take a look at this, it does say that it's CE certified. And I took a look at the 100 on the US website, and it does not appear to be CE certified. This is one of the reasons why I think you need to, if you're thinking about buying one of these machines from Cocoa Town, you want to make sure that you are purchasing one which does have a certificate. Again, the EU website says it is certified. The US website does not indicate that it is certified. I would be happier. This is a high voltage machine. I don't know. Is this a high voltage machine? I know that high voltage goes into here. This is the control panel. I don't know if it's high voltage coming out here into these machines. It's variable speed. So there's a VSD, a variable speed drive. There's a controller in here, and that may be DC. So the motor in here may be DC, which means it would be a low voltage machine. But the well-designed control panel is built with industry standard parts and UL certified components in a custom-built UI certified stainless steel UL certified stainless steel cabinet. I'm sort of confused why it doesn't actually say UL certified. It says that it's certified, CE certified here, right? But it says that the components are UL certified, the cabinet is UL certified, but it doesn't say that what they've built is UL certified. I think there's very, very careful language in that respect. I can use UL certified components and US certified parts and put them together in a way so that they're no longer UL certified. So I would, again, ask the question. And I think this is a little deliberately, well, it's vague and perhaps deliberately disingenuous language. So I would be careful about what's going on. Again, contact them directly. I mean, is the entire control panel UL certified? Yes or no? My guessing is that it's not, because it doesn't say UL certified, right? So just a quick thought. So let's go. This James. This is the refiner. This is the premier refiner from our friends at Diamond Custom Machines, melangers.com. If I was going to purchase one of these machines, I would buy it from a reputable website. I wouldn't look for something on Amazon. Amazon is known to be a place where you have to be careful about counterfeit gear. All right. And James, if you're still watching this, did you buy your Premiere from melangers.com? Right. So, let's go. I've got the image here because I wanted to show you that it's got cylindrical stones. It's got these center grooves. It's got plastic bearings. But the arm, the axle, which is between the stones, is a little heavier. But still, what we've got is we're putting pressure on the center. And we need to be careful about that pressure being even. Oh, and here's where you go. It is both CE certified and TUV SUD certified. That's very cool. But it's also got the US certification. So it's been safety tested. They monitor the production, the factory. All of those things are good things. It doesn't actually have the actual certificate. If you're worried, for insurance purposes, again, James, whenever you buy one of these machines, you want to, if there is a certificate, you want to download the certificate and have a local copy in hand, right? As part of your standard operating procedures, you might want to put it into a standard operating procedure, is that whenever you buy new equipment, what you do is you have a manual, you have the certifications, all that, you have copies of those things locally for insurance purposes. So here we have the small machine and, it is both CE and TUV certified. Is that worth the price difference? I think this is less expensive than the ABI from CocoTown. The CocoTown, the Spectra 11 is $475. The CocoTown is $550. So it looks like this machine, which is roughly the same price, is a great deal. This is the plastic one. There's a stainless steel one, a little bit more expensive, but for peace of mind, it's got these two certifications, and I would choose it over other options. We did the DCM 15, showed you that one already. The DCM 50, if we go take a look at it, all right, what we'll do is we'll find out, it doesn't say certifications on this page. It does. It's got the ETL Intertech certification, which means that this is the same thing, right? As this is a nationally, so ETL Intertech is a nationally recognized testing lab. So if it says ETL certified, it is the same thing as UL certified. One thing I don't see, and I would, again, ask our friends at DCM to say, is it listed or verified, right? So if it's ETL listed, that's different from if it is verified. A question to ask that's really, really important, and maybe important from an insurance perspective. So these are easy to find machines in the United States. Let's go to Kazama. So Kazama, Russia. So it's important. So with their small machine, there's nothing in here that says that is in fact certified. There's nothing on the page, but unlike many other, I took a look, I can download the manual, and it turns out that in the Kazama manual, it does mention whether or not there is certification on this at the bottom. So number one, there is a warranty, but it says that it is CE certified, right? Or which is a self-certification for the low voltage and other kinds of components, but it also has EAC. EAC is a Russia-specific certification. It's not going to be accepted anywhere outside of Russia. So if you did have a Kazama machine here in the United States, it's got the CE certification, but your local health inspector, your local insurance company may not accept CE certification on their own. Just a real quick note about that. I did take a look at a larger machine, the Kazama 85. Similar kind of thing. We don't have any indication on the page about certification, but we do go to the manual, and at the bottom of the manual, we have CE EAC. So we know about that. So you do sometimes have to go and take a deep dive when the people do provide the link to the manual. Go take a look at it. You should download the manual and have it. And I think that Kazama is one of the few people that says, here, download the user manual from the webpage even before you purchase, which I think is a great practice. One of the things that Mike asked me, and it's important to understand, let's go to this, is that Kazama is pushing this spiral groove design and over a design where you just have grooves which are in the center. And one of their claims is that what that will do is it's more efficient, right? It's more efficient at moving chocolate out from under, or whatever you're grinding, from underneath the stone, and as a result, and should provide more mixing force. So the spiral grooving will mean that you can do particle size reduction more quickly and more evenly. The physics of it appear to work, right? And one of the things that they do say is that the amount of that there is more contact area at the contact point with this design than there is in a standard design. It makes a lot of sense physically. There's no independent, unfortunately, there's no independent that I'm aware of testing that says, in fact, this is true. It makes physical sense. It makes sense that it works, but I would like to see somebody do some independent testing of it, and especially an independent testing lab do about it. There are a couple of things that I do really like about the way the Kazama machines. Number one is they have a reverse function, so you can run the entire machine in reverse. You can adjust the bowl speed. We all, on big machines, we all expect that as standard. But there is a thermal sensor, which is a great thing. So if the machine overheats, it will turn itself off. The other thing, they got a couple of nice things. So for example, this here is used to tilt the bowl up and down, so you don't have the kind of lock that's there. These are pneumatic, spring-loaded pistons. They're not pneumatic, they're spring-loaded, but they have locks so you can lock down the pressure at a particular point. Heavy-duty scrapers. I mean, these are very well-made machines. And I don't necessarily know that they are better than other machines. I'm not making a point. I'm just saying, okay, here are some things that you want to consider, right? So why spiral groove stones? So this is from their website and in their blogs, and so you can go figure it out. They do have some. So if you look at this, right, the contact line changes, right, but that's a lot of contact area up here, right, and it's the same amount of contact area as down here. So I don't know if the amount of contact area changes, but it says the contact area between the stones and the mass increases. Maybe, but it does. This one I do get. The mass is pulled under the stones more efficiently. Better mixing is going to provide you with faster processing times and improved texture. So, right. And here are some numbers that they provide, but they don't actually, there's no independent testing. So until there's independent testing, I would say, again, it makes sense, right? But right, we don't actually have independent testing that says it is. Not saying they're not saying true things. It's just that when manufacturers make claims like this, I would like to see independent testing of them, right? One of the things I do want to show is here's the FBM, and I'm going to go and show, you're not going to get the audio from this, I don't think. No, I'm not even getting the audio from this. And one of the things that I wanted to show, let's get this full screen, forget the lights, right? But one of the things I want to show is there's a lot of hardware here. There's a lot of hardware here. And one of the reasons why there's a lot of hardware on many of the FBM machines is that it is possible to, the way the machine is built, it's possible to exert a great deal of pressure on the stones. And a lot of this infrastructure here is designed to keep the axles from bending, right? And bending axles is going to be really bad for the machine. So that's one of the things to be careful about with FBM. The other thing is that there's a lot of stuff to clean here. I mean, there's an insane amount of stuff to clean here. So you do need to be careful about that with the FBM machines. Are they, I mean, let's see, let's go take a look. So I've got some images. Oh, here's another. I can hear that. I don't know if you can hear it. Right. So one of the reasons why this is the way it is, this is not the Roomba Max, this is the Roomba. But one of the reasons why it's important to understand is that for many of the machines, this is a full size, this is the Roomba. For many of the machines, the motor is on the top, right? So the axle goes down through the center, right? And there is, in fact, I don't know why, there is, in fact, a collar which you can use to change the pressure on the stones. You need to be really, really careful about that to get the same pressure. You don't want too much pressure. You don't want too little pressure, right? But there's a lot of hardware in these machines that requires a lot of, when you think about it, this is opening up, this is a Roomba, right? There's a lot of stuff in here that requires cleaning, right? So if you want to do changeover and you want to, is there, it's right. And unfortunately, yeah, I was responsible for suggesting that FBM build these machines in the first place. It was my idea to have the motor on the bottom rather than the motor on the top, rather than the motor on the bottom, right? But what's important to, well, yeah, to have the stones turn. That's one of the things about the Roombas. The stone turns, the base doesn't turn, which is important. You'll notice that, you can't get your hand stuck right between the bowl and the frame here. This frame also does other things. There's hot air blower. And so the pipes for the hot air, this is where the hot air goes in. They're hidden in this frame. This thing is stupidly heavy. It is probably the heaviest for its capacity of any machine on the market. Empty. Important to know. The other thing to consider is before you purchase a Roomba from FBM, ask them if there is an air filter, right, on the blower assembly. The last time I worked with them, which was 2019, early 2020, this was after several years of selling the machines. They didn't have an air filter. So if you've got the fan is on the bottom of this thing, right? So if you had any dirt on the floor and you were using the blower assembly, you were pushing it into the chocolate. So one thing to consider. I mean, there is CE certification on all these things. That's it. There's only CE certification on all this. But one of the things, you get high voltage goes into the machine, but they have a Schneider box. And what that Schneider box does is it is an electrical safety switch before the electricity goes into the machine. And in that respect, is a very, very carefully designed machine. But if you're going to buy one of these things, ask about a fan filter. Ask about a filter on the fan. There is CE certification, and you need to know about that. Just wanted to say. So certifications, who's got them, who doesn't have them, what do they talk about? Again, if you're not in Russia, the EAC certification that Kazama has doesn't mean anything. If in the United States, the CE certification might not mean anything. However, the fact that it does have a thermal cutoff and all these other things means that from an insurance perspective, is there a thermal cutoff? And if there's only a CE certification and there's no thermal cutoff, you need to make a decision. And that decision is whether or not you want to spend a couple $100, save a couple $100 when you buy the machine, and leave yourself open to insurance exposure, which answers the question from Mike at Encore Coffee and Chocolate, and to some addresses some of what James, RRO, was mentioning with his machine. He had a fire, but he didn't know that he had purchased a counterfeit machine. And so the insurance company went ahead and paid out the claim. You may not get as lucky in what you're doing. So let's continue on, and let's go talk about this. Again, I'm sorry, this is a new browser. It's based on Firefox. I don't want that. I want this. I don't want that either. What I want is this. There we go. All right. So again, new monitor setup, new browser. It works in a different way. Just want to talk about what's going on. So let's talk about some FAQs regarding countertop and floor standing melangers. But before I get there, all of the things that I've been talking about, CE, UL, NSF, apply to every bit of equipment in your workshop. Tempering machine, right? Everything, right? You had to buy an NSF certified 3-compartment sink for your workshop if it's not a home kitchen. Everything is subject to these. If there's electricity associated with it, ULCE, ETL, TUV, SUD, one of those things should be somewhere visible on your piece of machine. It's not just the melanger. It's just that I use the melangers as framing because of the fire, as framing for how to go about and approach these kinds of topics. So number one, wheel construction materials. There are people who make stainless steel wheels. There are people who make Teflon or Delrin wheels. There are people who make stone wheels. It turns out that stone is what everybody wants because it's the most authentic, quote unquote, the most authentic. The original chocolate would have been made, metate, right, and a mano. That's the way it would have been ground. So there is that authenticity. But you do need to be careful about the stone itself. Granite is not uniformly hard. And it turns out that some people will polish the surface of their stones and some people will not polish the surface of their stones. You do need to find out or ask, or at least be curious about the hardness of the granite, or if it's real granite or composite that's used for your stone materials. From a food safety point of view, it's important, right? You do need to understand what the machine is made from, right? Now, pressure, as I've talked about, you do need to be careful about pressure. It is possible to over tighten, add too much pressure. If you add too much pressure, what will happen is that the axle, which is holding the stones, will bow, and that means there's no longer a flat contact surface. So it's not like, let me tighten down as tight as I can, right? You want to tighten it down, right? Probably without chocolate in it. Get it to work, and then somehow indicate that that's the pressure you want to put on it, right? This is where some gadgets are really, really important, right? And some in terms of helping you do this. That's when it comes to pressure. It is possible to have too much pressure on your machine. It's possible to have too little pressure, which means that refining efficiency is going to be less. It will just take longer to achieve the same. Generally, it's probably better to have too little pressure than too much pressure. The shape, sizes, and groove patterns. Yes, this will have a an impact. But if you take a look at the old style melangers, the big Lehmann melangers and things like that, the stones are flat, right? And there's no pressure. It's just the stones are so huge, you lower them up and down on change. It's just the weight of the stones, right, sitting on the surface that does everything. There are no grooves which are in the stones. It turns out, in order to increase the efficiency with these small stones, that where you're manually putting pressure on things rather than letting the weight of the stones do the work, that adding the grooves made them reasonably efficient. So that's why they're done. The groove pattern could matter. Just, are 2 grooves better than 3 grooves, or spiral grooves better than 2 grooves? The answer is, it all depends on how you use it. If you use it absolutely correctly, right, then it may be that a spiral groove configuration, just because it's moving the chocolate, right? And I would say you probably, I don't know, would it make sense to have them move in or move to the outside? I'd have to think about the mechanics of that, right? Anyway, you know, my brain is spinning. I don't know the answer to that question, right? So other materials. One of the other materials that you might want to ask about is if there is plastic, right? What is that plastic inside, right? And the other one is if there are glue, if there is some sort of sealant which is used. I mean, cocoa butter, when it gets warm, is incredibly fluid, and so you're going to need some sort of sealant, some sort of gasket material, which is going to keep the cocoa butter from flowing out all over the place. It needs to be not just food contact safe, but it needs to be food safe. If you're at all concerned, you want to go ask your manufacturer, what are you using for that gasket material? And show me what's called the MSDS, the Material Safety Data Sheet, on it. You want to know that, in fact, it is food safe. When you're doing visual inspection, you should empty out the machine, clean it if possible on a fairly regular basis, and you should go look at the integrity of those gasket materials. Does it look like they're peeling off? Yes or no, right? You don't want that stuff in your chocolate, which is why it's really good at the very minimum to have some sort of sieve process you pour the chocolate through. So if they're large pieces, they don't get into the tempering machine, which is going on. Direct drive or belt drive? Okay, so the answer to the question is, if you have the option, direct drive is always going to be best, right? That anytime there is a motor over here and the drum is over here, and you have a mechanical connection between the motor and the drum in an offset drive, you're going to be losing efficiency. There's going to be additional friction. There's going to be additional wear. If you have a rubber pulley, like a V pulley or something like that, if you have a belt, it is going to wear down over time. It is going to stretch over time. If it starts to slip and overheats, the smell of rubber may get into your chocolate. So you do need to consider that. If you are using a chain drive, find out if you need to lubricate that on a regular basis. So you just need to make, does the gear require an oil change, right? With a direct drive, the bearings are going to be sealed. The gear reduction is going to be sealed. If you're actually doing a DC motor drive, so you've got the variable speed in the drive itself just by changing the voltage, or using a variable frequency drive for an AC motor or in an AC system, that direct drive will reduce, will eliminate the need for belts or chains. If you have the option, just from an engineering perspective, what I would say is always prefer a direct drive over a belt drive. Direct drive may or may not be more expensive. I mean, if we look at the difference in price between the Spectra 11, let me go and make this work. So if we look at the difference in price between a Spectra 11 and the Cocoa Town ABI 10 and the DCM 15, I suspect that part of the drive price difference is going to be this DC motor and the electronics in it to control the DC motor. That's my guess. I'm not entirely sure. But for me, the ability, the mechanically, it's so much simpler. It is going to have a greater longevity. And I would opt for it every single time, especially when you consider from a total cost of ownership. Um, when you think about, I don't know if there's a thermal cutoff switch on this. We talked to Bhavani. It shouldn't be that difficult to add to it. But this one does have a reverse on it. And it also has variable speed on it, which are really important things. And it turns out that this machine at 15 pounds or 7 kilos is about the same as the Kazama 7 kilo machine, which is at least 3 times the price, right? Something to consider. But one of the things that the Kazama does have, let me go and put it on the right screen. One of the things that the Kazama does have, again, I'm sorry, I'm just getting used to this. One of the things that the Kazama 7 does have, it does have, which the DCM machine does, it does have the ability to lock down once you get the pressure a particular place. So from batch to batch to batch, it's likely to have the same pressure. I believe if we look at the larger Cocoa Town machine, one of the things that they offer is a pressure gauge, right? So what you can do is you can tighten this down, right? As you see here, you can tighten this down until you get the pressure at a certain point. One of the questions Mike asked, if you're still here, one of the questions you asked that I thought was really, really important is, are add-ons useful, and specifically the pneumatic add-on and that DCM offers for the larger machines? And the answer, in my opinion, is from the pneumatic add-on, the larger the machine, the better they are. And here's why. And it's something that people don't consider. And I spent a lot of time with Bhavani talking about this, which is that as the particle size changes in the chocolate, if you have a constant pressure machine, right, what will happen is that the rollers, the wheels will ride up and down on against the base, right? And the bigger wheels, you get one distance, and then with the bigger particles, you got one distance, and the smaller particles, you got another distance. When you have a pneumatic device, what it does, it's going to maintain constant pressure, irrespective of the particle size under the wheels, right? And so there is a greater consistency when you spread it out over time, right, in terms of particle size distribution. And that's one of the things that you're looking at. You're not just looking at particle size, you're looking at particle size distribution. And so given the opportunity, I would absolutely say for a larger machine, if you do have the option for a pneumatic device, ask the manufacturer. I mean, is what's going on, it's maintaining constant pressure irrespective of the particle size? And if the answer to that question is yes, that's a good thing. If we look at the Kazama 7, you set the pressure, and the pressure is the pressure, right? If I go to this, I mean, the pressure is the pressure, right? And it's not going to self-adjust, right, based on the particle size underneath what's going on. So these things are a little bit more useful in the sense that I can be more consistent, right? But they're less expensive. But an actual pneumatic with a compressor, right, making sure that the pressure adjusts automatically over time is in fact the way to go, in my opinion. If I was going to buy a large melanger, I would look for one that offered a pneumatic pressure adjustment system for that reason. It will give you more consistent pressure, which will lead to more consistent particle size distribution. It will, chances are, the center of distribution and the curve, which is plus or minus the center, will be narrower, which is what you want. You don't want a lot of huge particles. You don't want a lot of really, really small particles. The really small particles are what are going to contribute to the sort of like the peanut buttery pasty texture. You do not want that. So just a bunch of things to consider there. The other thing that I do want to mention, because Mike, you asked it as a question, was another add-on would be the heaters that DCM makes as an option. So let's go with the DCM 50. Let's go products, professional melangers. Let's see if I can find anything which talks about what they call their rapid refiner. So the rapid refiner, so here's the pneumatic pressure system. Again, if you've got an opportunity, I would definitely go take a look at it. and the rapid refiner. One of the things that the rapid refiner does, right, which is important to understand, right, is that what it does is it's a heater, right? And what you can do is you can run it for a period of time before you put your ingredients into it, before you put the nibs, before you put the sugar. You can run this and you can heat up the stones, whether it's the grinding stone or the base stone, right? You can heat things up. You're not obviously running it where you have just a little bit in the bottom, right? And so you can heat things up, right? And it says it creates a gentle airflow, 30 cubic feet per minute. I'd like this variable airflow, and then I would like also a variable temperature, right? So that's number one. So the rapid refiner, so if the stones are warm, then when you put things in, it's going to express the cocoa butter out of everything much more quickly, right? Then number two is, and this is why I think variable speed airflow is really important, and variable temperature is really important, is that you have the ability to blow warm air or over the surface of the chocolate inside the melanger, which will increase conching, right? Which will increase conching time, decrease conching time, right? So it will, if I can get the surface temperature above 60 degrees centigrade, it turns out if there's any acetic acid left in the water phase of the chocolate, it will evaporate out more efficiently. So if you do have an acidic chocolate, getting the temperature above 60 degrees centigrade in the first hour or two of refining, it will take the acidity off the top very, very quickly. So one of the things about the rapid refiner, and I don't know enough about it, but if it is adjustable temperature and adjustable airflow, that would be great. So it will. The heating setting helps to reduce the moisture. The cooling function works by blowing room temperature air on the outside of the drum to bring down the temperature of the contents should this be necessary. So one of the things that melangers do not have, for the most part, is any control over the temperature. One of the things I talked about Bhavani was actually having a thermocouple in the chocolate and a little computer that would change the rotational speed of the drum so that it would maintain a constant temperature, or reach a constant temperature and hold it there, and then change the speed of the drum in order to be able to maintain that temperature. That having two fans, one of which blows air into the machine and one of which blows air on the outside of the machine, are both very, very useful things to maintain temperature. Their efficiency depends on, if I can only blow ambient air, there's a difference if the room is at 20 degrees centigrade or 30 degrees centigrade. So the efficiency of working with that depends upon what ambient is, as well as the airflow. Better than nothing, right? But you don't have any control of it. Listen, if you have something like that, you could just take a fan and blow air, right? If you have a little portable air conditioner, you can blow cold air against it. I mean, there are ways to do this. And there's no price associated with this on the page. But you got that. But if I were to do this inside a melanger, again, right, I'd want controllable temperature and controllable airflow. And that's something we did on the original Roombo, is you could get the temperature up to 70 degrees centigrade, right, in terms of the hot air that you blew into the Roombo, right? And you could blow a lot of air very, very quickly into that thing. You needed to be, so why do we do this? Number one is we wanted to heat up the stones very quickly. I mean, the mass of the steel on the bowl is insane. We wanted to make sure that we heated up the bowl very, very quickly. And that decreased the amount of time necessary to express the cocoa butter in the nibs that we were refining. But you also have to be very careful. The higher the temperature, right, and the faster the airflow, right, the quicker you're driving off all volatile aromatics. We had people who would, set the temperature to 70 degrees, let it run for 4 hours, and the chocolate was totally flat, right? It is just really, really efficient in terms of just driving off the volatile aromatics. Now, a couple of things. Number one is you don't necessarily ruin the chocolate. You just add it back into recipes, blend, right? You add it back into recipes until, as a way of achieving a consistent result. There's nothing wrong with blending for consistency within the same recipe. It's still single origin, right? It's just your definition of what a batch is has changed. So it's not necessarily that if you overconch, you're going to ruin the chocolate. You can always find something to do with it. But you do need to be very careful about how these machines work and what it is that they do. So just to know. But that's why, again, Mike, I know that you're back in the conversation again. I hope I answered the question, right? The rapid refiner helps makers maintain desired temperature from batch to batch because the temperature reading is measured internally using a thermocouple. That's really really cool. They're going to put the thermocouple into the chocolate and they're going to run the machine. They're going to control the temperature. So again, if I had to choose one manufacturer over another, so for example, if I was going to go take a look at a Kazama 85, no price on it. But if I've got a Kazama 85 versus with its spiral wheels versus a DCM of the same rough capacity, like 150, like 75 kilos, and I could put a rapid refiner on it and the pneumatic pressure on it, I would err on the side of preferring the version that I could put the rapid refiner and the pneumatic pressure device on it, because those things are an incredible value in terms of increasing efficiency, not just getting to a particular particle size at a particular time. Because as most of you know, you might spend, right? But then what you'll do is you might spend the next day doing the finished texture and finished flavor development. And so particle size reduction in terms of the grooves structure is not the only thing, right? It is one of several things that need to be concerned. So hopefully, Mike, that answered the questions. Again, this is an extension of the melanger discussion, because what we were doing in this episode is we were using melangers, right, as a way to talk about certification and safety and related issues. There is a little note here that says at the bottom, which does talk about safety recommendations and implications. Already talked about those. So number one, no matter where you are, if you're running a piece of equipment, right? No matter where you are, right? If you are running a piece of equipment overnight, unattended, right? You should consider the following. A smart smoke alarm or fire alarm smoke detector. You want to have a smart fire alarm smoke detector right above on the wall, wherever the manufacturer says you should put those things, right? In the space where the machines are. And if you've got a number of machines in more than one location, right? That device, the reason why I call it smart, is it should be able to trigger either sending you an email or sending you an SMS, an alert, right? So that if there is an event where it detects smoke or it detects a fire, that you are notified immediately. You want to make sure that that happens, right? If your machinery does not have, even if your machinery does have certifications, right? You want to do that. I mean, if you don't want to go to the expense of building a wobble detector in a machine, maybe what you could do is you could put a security webcam, and there may be enough motion so that the security webcam will go, oh, I now have something moving in my field of view. I'm going to notify someone. That's another thing that might work. I haven't tested any of them, but a motion detector could work in terms of solving the problem. I'm just thinking about that. And the other thing to do when it comes to this is you need to go and do a very, very close reading of what the fire rider is on your insurance policy or policies. You need to make sure, and if you're working with an agent and you're talking to a person, you need to figure out what is covered and is not covered, what you need to do, and are there things that you can do to avoid that happening to you, right? So here we have a fire, and this looks like the melanger that got cooked. This one, don't know what's going on, but the walls caught fire. I am guessing this looks like to be a space in a home, just looking at the door that's here, right? Whatever surfaces were on this wall here were not fireproof. And that's the other thing. Make sure that your machine is sitting on a stainless steel table, and that whatever the surfaces are around that table, they are fire resistant. So a sheet of aluminum, sheet of stainless steel, something like that, something that's going to keep the wall from catching fire. Chances are it needs to be washable, but just having a sheetrock surface with a washable paint is not enough. You want to make sure that what you've got will be fire resistant. And then take all of these ideas, all of these things that you've done to reduce the likelihood of there being a fire. You need to talk to your insurance agent and make sure that you're covered, right? And so we've walked through certifications, some of the things that you can do, some of the things that you can do to make your place a little safer, and that the real importance of speaking with your insurance agency to make sure you're covered. And that's it. We've gone really long today, but thank you very much for being here. It's here in the United States. It is the 3rd of July. I hope everybody has a safe and sane 4th of July tomorrow. And I hope that you are able to celebrate the past 250 years and look at the next 250 years optimistically. There's not necessarily a whole lot to be optimistic about, in my opinion, but I'm going to celebrate tomorrow with that idea in mind, and I hope you can as well. And with that, if you're not a member of the Chocolate Life, you can go click on the join button. There's always a free tier. There are premium tiers which provide consulting hours. And if you want to take advantage of them, you can join becoming a premium tier, but there's always been a free membership tier since the Chocolate Life was founded in 2008. If you haven't liked the video, please like the video. If you're not subscribed to the PodSafe Chocolate YouTube channel, please subscribe to the PodSafe Chocolate YouTube channel. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much, everybody, for being here. And to remind you that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you are doing it wrong. Until the next time, everyone, ciao.